Hockey town, it's a place where dreams are found. We fought so many battles here, now we're the ones that they will fear. The cup resides within our town, we won't stop, no letting down. The cup is ours, we're all to drink. It's our town, let's rock this ring. Hey, hockey town. I'm not alone, just look around. Hey, hockey town. Raise the roof, let's hear the sound. On us at every turn, the puck is dropped, the fever burns. Flesh speed, some brilliant daring. Red lights flash, the horns are blaring. Hockey town, our hunger's fed by our men in white and red. They dazzle us before our eyes. Lord Stanley's Cup, we have the prize. Hey, hockey town. I'm not alone, just look around. Hey, hockey town. Raise the roof, let's hear the sound.
The Detroit Red Wings believe that they're on the cusp of returning to hockey's elite. How realistic is that expectation, and how have the moves they've made this offseason contributed to that goal? I had the opportunity this afternoon to talk to ESPN Radio's Sean Baligian to get you the answers to those very questions. So Sean, first of all, thank you for joining us to talk Red Wings hockey this morning on the Two-Man Advantage podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you so much for asking me to come on. It's my pleasure.
So let's jump right into it. And obviously, after 10 seasons, Mike Babcock is now out and Jeff Blashill is in. And obviously, for the Red Wings, they're judged on what they do in the playoffs. So if Babcock, one of the best coaches in the league, could get them over the hump after the first round the last couple of years, what makes the Red Wings think that Jeff can do what Babcock couldn't?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, you have to remember, in the cap era, you have to make some decisions and business decisions as such. And so the Red Wings, not being blessed with the early round draft choices, have had to do their best in developing, not only guys that were taken later in the first round, but guys that were taken later in the draft. And, I know over there in Windsor, you guys are certainly well aware with what I think is one of the best hockey leagues in the world, the Ontario Hockey League. The Red Wings have used leagues like the Ontario Hockey League and taken guys later in the draft that for some reason slipped or didn't go as highly as they could, and they've done a good job developing them. Jeff Blashill has had a really good touch with some of those young players. He's had a tremendous amount of success in Grand Rapids, and I think this transition will be more seamless than people give it credit for.
And can you tell me what differences do you think we'll see under Blashill that we didn't see under Mike Babcock?
The one thing that you have to remember with the Red Wings is it's almost coming to the point of cliche, but it's true. The Red Wing way. There's the Red Wing way. And I think they develop a certain way. They coach a certain way. Everybody's kind of rowing in the same direction in this franchise. With Jeff Blashill, I don't expect too much of a change from an approach to the game. He's a process guy, and I think he started to get the process down in his year when he was here in 2011 to 2012. I think what you're going to see is more fluidity with some of the younger players. As I mentioned, Blash has done a tremendous job with the young guys. I think you're going to see some of those guys not only given more of an opportunity, but probably given more of a responsibility as well.
Obviously, 10 years is a long time for any coach to be in one place, no matter the league. So can you tell me, what do you think is the biggest reason Babcock is now in Toronto, and the Red Wings are moving on. Is it simply money, or is it simply the fact that the Red Wings wouldn't give him the extra years on the contract?
I really firmly believe it was about money. I had been saying it for the past year. The thing that I had heard over and over was that Mike Babcock felt like he had a responsibility to the rest of the league. Like he could raise the bar for the entire league. And, coaches, I think Don Cherry brought up a really good point about coaches. What helps a team more, a great coach or a third-line winger or a fourth-line player or whatever? I think coaches deserved to have the bar raised and everything. And I think Mike Babcock knew that he had a unique opportunity where not only could he go out and get the best for him, but he could raise the bar for everybody else. So I think first and foremost it was money. But I do think, and you bring up a tremendous point about you're there for 10 years, and sometimes the voice goes thin. Athletes, sometimes they need a new voice. Even the great Scotty Bowman grated on players' nerves. I always bring this quote up. Ken Dryden said that, when the Habs were in the midst of winning those 4 cups in a row, the players were united in their hate for Scotty Bowman 364 days of the year. And then on the 365th day, they went and got their Stanley Cup. I thought that was a really unique way to look at it. But, when you're not winning, I think sometimes people, maybe they don't have that kind of 364 days, 365-day thing.
Very true. Now, when we look at what the Red Wings did in the draft, they had the 19th pick, and they selected Russian forward Evgeny Svechnikov. I think I got that right. So can you give me just your general impressions on what the Wings did in the overall draft itself?
Well, I thought, there are a couple guys there at that spot that kind of fit what the Red Wings are looking for. One in particular, a kid from Sweden, Eriksson, that's a two-way guy and everything. Let me say this, that their first-round draft choice, he played for a mediocre team in Quebec Majors, and in his first year in North America, he didn't look out of place. He's big. I think a lot of people talk about his offensive acumen, and you guys know the routine watching this team. The one thing you have to give Ken Holland for, he wants guys that are responsible, and I think what happens is after that, a lot of times you'll look at the Red Wings taking guys that you better play two ways. You better be a two-way player or the Red Wings don't want you part of the system. So, as you guys know, and, I'm an OHL guy as well, these guys can be taken, and sometimes they don't turn into what you thought they would be. Sometimes they turn into more than what you thought they would be. But it's going to be a process. It's going to be a few years before we really know, what these guys are going to do. I'll go back to last year. I told anybody that would listen, when everybody was all about, Anthony Mantha, he's not even a year out of junior, and I know he lit it up in the queue, and I'm not saying that his future isn't bright and everything, but this is a scenario where you're talking about a guy that you have to learn to play the complete game, and there were some growing pains in his first year, but with that being said, don't quite give up on him yet, you know what I mean?
Development is always something that the Red Wings are good at, so absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, transitioning to free agency, one of the Red Wings' first moves was to get rid of the contract of Stephen Weiss and re-sign Brendan Smith. So, I'm just wondering your initial impressions of that move in particular and the Red Wings' attempt to get a little bit younger.
Well, I'm, for me personally, I'm sure you guys know this. I had the privilege of doing Plymouth Whaler broadcasts for many, many years. And I got to know Stephen Weiss. I love Stephen Weiss, the kid. I think he's a young man that has grown up quite a bit, and he's turned into a productive hockey player. It didn't work here. I think Stephen Weiss would be the first one to tell you. It doesn't help that he was injured and had to get healthy and everything, but it didn't work here. I will say this. I think the Red Wings at times the last couple of years are a little guilty of overrating some of their talent. I think they wrote some checks for Brendan Smith that he has not been able to cash. Now, does that mean that he's not a productive defenseman? No, he is a productive defenseman. But I think that the Red Wings really thought that this guy was going to be a next level type of guy. I think he's a depth guy. But with that being said, hey, listen, if you can hold on to your own and you can continue to groom them and you can continue to use them in a group but understand what they are, that's what the cap era is all about, finding value with guys.
And just continuing with the free agent team, the Red Wings got Brad Richards from Chicago, and then got Mike Green from in free agency as well. So I'm wondering what your initial thoughts are of those moves, and whether you think the Red Wings are done in free agency.
Well, I'm pretty sure that they are done. They have some housekeeping to take care of. I think the next move for the Red Wings will be via trade. You know, they did a real good job sitting out of the party the last couple of years. And I think that in retrospect appears to have been the good decision, because look at the way that Boston has had to blow themselves up after going in and losing a couple guys before they even hit their prime, in Dougie Hamilton and Tyler Seguin. And the same thing can be said for Pittsburgh. I'll start with Mike Green. I've never been a real big Mike Green guy, and what I mean by that is he's a productive player, make no mistake about it, but there are some limitations to his game. He's been better in his own zone, and he comes to a Red Wing team where I think he's immediately one of the top two defensemen. It's kind of not a Ken Holland type of move, if you know what I mean. Ken's been a guy that in a cap era has looked for value. $6 million for Mike Green, again, I'm not begrudging what he brings to the table, but take a look at some of the top-paid defensemen out there. I'm not sure if Mike Green's in that list. But again, if your goal is to make your team better, well, then Ken Holland did just that. As far as Brad Richards goes, I know you guys are hockey fans. This isn't the Brad Richards from 10 years ago. It isn't the Brad Richards from even 5 years ago. But this is a guy that I think can come in and be a solidifying force, a veteran in the room. And I think he'll bring a little more production than perhaps some of the naysayers are saying. I'm not saying that he's going to come in here and, again, show flashes of being one of the better players in the league. But I think he's going to bring a little bit more to the table than some people are saying.
And when you look at the Red Wings as a whole, what do you think is the key for Blashill to be successful in his first year, and what areas do the Red Wings need to improve on, in your opinion, in order to take the next step?
Well, I've always felt the last couple of years, I think secondary scoring has been said so much that you know, it's almost come to the point of old bit. I think people are starting to realize some of the limitations in their back end. And again, I'll go back to this. I think they maybe overrated the talent of some of those guys. Danny DeKeyser is fine. He's not the Norris Trophy candidate that I think some people think him to be. Smith, same thing. Fine defenseman. I don't think he became into the stud that many, envision him to be. So I think it starts in their back end. Mike Green, while not a defensive player, he isn't as bad as he used to be with his limitations and everything. It'll be interesting to see, if they bring up a couple of the guys, Marchenko, we saw part of him last year. There's still Sproul down there. There's still some talent at that position in the lower levels and everything. But I'll tell you what, guys, to me personally, I think this is a scenario where you get a little scoring and get that back end to tighten up a little bit. And the way that Peter Mrazek can charm you, hey, I think they're going to be right in it. And this division is so tough. It's not going anywhere. Montreal's going to be there again. Tampa's going to be there again. Detroit needs to stay with them for sure in the arms race.
And in terms of the goalie situation, I know it's early, and when Blashill had his introductory press conference, he called them both NHL caliber goalies. So in your opinion, who has the leg up now to start for the Red Wings and Nets?
I think it's Peter Mrazek. I really do. I remember Peter in the OHL. When I was doing Whalers stuff, I was really I was really fond of his work when he was in Ottawa and everything. And I think everybody showed what he's capable of, at the highest level against Tampa. That's not a slight against Jimmy Howard. I think so many people have turned it into a Jimmy Peter thing. I think Peter Mrazek is a guy that has a higher ceiling, to be sure. And you got to remember, Jake Patterson is still in the system, and I know from talking to Chris Osgood in the past, now he works with Fox Sports Detroit, but being a part of the Red Wing pecking order and developing and judging some of these players. I know he's high on Jake Patterson, who played in Saginaw, and then, of course, later in Kitchener. Thomas McCollum really had a comeback couple of years in Grand Rapids. People forget this was a first-round draft choice out of Guelph, and he had his struggles. But I'll tell you what, the last couple of years, and, oh, by the way, playing for Coach Blashill, he's done a good job getting his game back up. So, yeah, they are in a position where there are a few goaltenders. Well, Patterson's not quite ready yet, coming straight out of Kitchener. But they're in a position where they've got some goaltenders now.
And my final question for you is just relating to the NHL Hall of Fame announcements. Obviously, Nicholas Lidstrom and Sergei Fedorov both got nominated for induction earlier recently. So I'm wondering what your initial thoughts are of them and getting the call from the Hall.
Well, it's awesome. It really is. I would be remiss. I mentioned the Whalers before. Former Whaler and Windsor Spitfire owner Peter Kermanis got in. He's my boss. I'd like to consider him a friend, so I'm happy for him. I've said this to anybody that listen. When you talk about the greatest of all time, I don't like to, on a personal level, talk about guys which I've never seen. And so, when people say, who's the greatest defenseman? Well, the easy answer is Bobby Orr. I never saw Bobby Orr play in his prime. I never did. And the Bobby Orr that I saw was a broken-down version. Although Larry Robinson is my personal hero, and I loved him growing up, Nick Lidstrom's the best defenseman I've ever seen. He did everything. He did it so effortlessly. I remember talking to scouts years ago, and I was at Compua Arena, and I asked a bunch of pro scouts, what makes Nick Lidstrom Nick Lidstrom? And you know what so many people said? It's his mind. It's the ability to think. It's the ability to be one step ahead. And certainly he showed that on the air. Sergei Fedorov was an enigma his entire career. I don't think he should have been an enigma. He was a tremendous player. He was such an incredible two-way player. He's the type of guy, guys, I would really like to see Sergei Fedorov in his prime, in this league, in a cap era, the way things are today. It would be a lot of fun to see. Deserving, no question about that, no debate, and it'll be fun to see the festivities in November in Toronto.
Fantastic. So we would like to thank you for spending part of your morning with us talking Red Wings hockey on the True Man Advantage podcast.
Anytime. You guys get a hold of me anytime. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.